Captain Marcus Chen had seen his share of dangerous situations during his 15 years exploring the Outer Rim territories, but nothing quite prepared him for the sight that greeted him on the mining planet Kepler 442b. The distress signal had been weak, almost lost in the cosmic background noise, but something about its desperate pattern made him alter course from his planned route to the Centauri trade stations. The planet's surface was a harsh landscape of red dust and jagged rock formations, with an atmosphere barely breathable for humans even with filtration masks. Marcus adjusted his environmental suit as he stepped off his small exploration vessel, the Wanderer, and scanned the horizon with his tactical binoculars. The signal had originated from somewhere beyond a cluster of metallic structures that looked like abandoned mining equipment. As he approached the structures, the sound of weapon fire echoed across the barren landscape. Energy blasts illuminated the twilight sky in violent flashes of blue and orange. Marcus quickened his pace, drawing his plasma rifle from its magnetic holster. Whatever was happening ahead, someone was in serious trouble. Cresting a low hill, Marcus found himself overlooking a small valley where the real drama was unfolding. 3 large insectoid creatures with chitinous armor and multiple arms were advancing on a single figure who had taken cover behind an overturned mining cart. The figure was clearly not human, but was definitely in distress, returning fire with what appeared to be a damaged energy weapon that sparked with each shot. The creatures were unlike anything in Marcus's xenobiology database. Each stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 6 limbs that ended in wicked-looking claws. Their movements were coordinated, suggesting intelligence, but their aggressive behavior toward the lone defender made it clear who the victim was in this scenario. Without hesitation, Marcus raised his rifle and targeted the nearest creature. His first shot caught its center mass, sending it stumbling backward with a screech that sounded like grinding metal. The other 2 turned toward this new threat, their multifaceted eyes glinting in the fading light. "Hey, ugly!" Marcus shouted, diving behind a boulder as return fire scorched the air where he had been standing. "Why don't you pick on someone your own size?" The creatures split up, one continuing to harass the figure behind the cart, while the other moved to flank Marcus's position. These things were smart, he realized, too smart for comfort. Marcus rolled to his right, just as claws raked the stone where his head had been. The creature had moved with surprising stealth for something so large. He fired 3 quick shots, the plasma bolts searing through chitin and drawing another metallic shriek. The creature staggered but didn't fall, its alien physiology proving more resilient than expected. A new sound joined the firefight, a high-pitched whistle that seemed to come from the figure behind the cart. Immediately, the wounded creature Marcus had been fighting turned and began retreating. The other 2 followed suit, disappearing into the maze of mining equipment with remarkable speed. Marcus remained in cover for several minutes, waiting to see if this was a trick. When no further attacks came, he cautiously approached the overturned cart, keeping his rifle ready. "Hello?" he called out in Standard Galactic, the common trade language used throughout known space. "I'm human. Are you injured?" a voice responded in accented but clear Standard Galactic. "I am functional. You may approach, but slowly. I do not know your intentions." Marcus rounded the cart and got his first clear look at the being he had helped save. She was definitely female, though her species was unfamiliar to him. Standing about 2 meters tall, she had pale blue skin with intricate silver markings that seemed to shimmer in the twilight. Her hair was white as starlight and fell in complex braids adorned with small metallic ornaments. Most striking were her eyes, which were large and violet, with an intelligence that spoke of advanced civilization. She wore what appeared to be form-fitting armor that had seen better days, with several scorch marks and a cracked shoulder piece. In her hands she held the damaged energy weapon, though she kept it pointed downward in a non-threatening manner. "My name is Marcus Chen, captain of the exploration vessel Wanderer," he said, lowering his own weapon. I received a distress signal and came to investigate. Are you hurt? The alien woman studied him for a long moment before responding. I am Zarathe of the Luminary Confederation. I am grateful for your assistance, human Marcus Chen. Those were Kethvar raiders. They have been hunting me for 3 days. Kethvar? Marcus asked, unfamiliar with the species name. Slavers and pirates, Zarathe explained, checking her damaged weapon with obvious frustration. They prey on solo travelers and sell them to the highest bidder. My ship was disabled in orbit and I was forced to take an escape pod to this world. Marcus nodded, understanding the situation. Well, you're safe now. My ship is just over that ridge. I can take you to the nearest civilized system, get you back to your people. Something flickered across Zarathe's features, an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. You would do this? Even though we are strangers? Of course, Marcus replied, genuinely puzzled by the question. You were in trouble, I helped. That's what any decent person would do. Zarathe was quiet for so long that Marcus began to wonder if he had said something wrong. When she finally spoke, her voice was oddly formal. Human Marcus Chen, by the ancient laws of my people, you have saved my life in combat. This creates a debt that cannot be repaid with mere words or currency. Look, you don't owe me anything, Marcus said, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I'm just glad I could help. You do not understand, Zarathe continued, and now there was something almost ceremonial in her tone. Among the Luminari, when one warrior saves another from death in battle, it creates a bond that transcends normal social obligations. The saved must offer their most precious possession to their savior. Marcus shifted uneasily. Really, that's not necessary. I don't need any payment. Zarathe's violet eyes met his directly. For an unmarried female of noble birth, there is only one possession that fits this ancient requirement. The implications of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Wait, are you saying what I think you're saying? By the laws of my ancestors, I must offer myself in marriage to you, Marcus Chen of the humans. It is the only way to properly honor the debt of life. Marcus felt his world tilt sideways. He had come to this planet expecting to maybe repair some broken mining equipment or help stranded prospectors. He certainly hadn't expected to accidentally propose to an alien princess through an act of basic human decency. That's really not necessary, he stammered. I mean, I'm honored, but surely there's some other way to handle this. Zarathe shook her head, her expression grave. There is no other way that would not bring dishonor upon my family name. I am the daughter of High Admiral Thay Moran of the Third Fleet. To refuse to offer marriage would be to declare that my life has no value, that I am worth less than a commoner. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a habit he'd developed when faced with particularly complicated problems. And if I refuse the marriage offer? Then you would be declaring that I am unworthy of your consideration, which would also bring dishonor. Either way, the slight would create a blood feud between your people and mine that could last generations. So let me get this straight, Marcus said slowly. I save your life. And now I have to either marry you or start an interstellar war. That is an accurate summary, yes. Marcus looked around the desolate landscape, at the alien woman standing before him with her damaged armor and formal expression, and wondered how his simple life as an independent explorer had suddenly become so incredibly complicated. This is definitely not covered in the standard first contact protocols, he muttered. Zarathe tilted her head. I do not understand that reference. Never mind, Marcus sighed. Look, can we at least discuss this on my ship? This planet gives me the creeps, and I'd rather not have this conversation with Kethvar raiders potentially listening in. That would be acceptable, Zarathe agreed. But understand, human, that time does not change the nature of the debt. Each moment that passes without resolution adds to the dishonor. Marcus shouldered his rifle and gestured toward the ridge where his ship waited. Then I guess we better figure this out quickly. As they walked across the rocky terrain, Marcus found himself stealing glances at his unexpected companion. Zarathe moved with a fluid grace that spoke of extensive combat training, and despite her claim of gratitude, she maintained an alertness that suggested she still didn't fully trust him. Fair enough, considering they had just met under rather dramatic circumstances. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said as they climbed the slope. "You may ask. How exactly does someone like you end up alone on a mining planet being chased by slavers? No offense, but you don't seem like the typical target for random pirates." Zarathe was quiet for several steps before answering. "I was conducting a diplomatic mission to the Vegan Republic. The Kethavar must have learned of my route and laid a trap. My escort was destroyed, and my personal ship was disabled. I managed to reach this planet in an escape pod, but they followed me down." "A diplomatic mission?" Marcus repeated. "So you're not just nobility, you're actively involved in government." "I serve as my father's representative in matters requiring delicate negotiation." Marcus had a feeling there was more to that story, but he decided not to press. They had bigger problems to deal with right now. The Wanderer came into view as they crested the ridge. Marcus's ship was nothing fancy. A modified long-range scout vessel designed for extended solo missions. Compared to the sleek military craft he was sure Zarathe was accustomed to, it probably looked primitive. "Your vessel is compact," she observed diplomatically. "She's not much to look at, but she's reliable," Marcus replied, activating the boarding ramp with a remote command. "Come on, let's get inside and figure out how to solve this mess." As they entered the ship, Marcus couldn't help but notice how Zarathe examined everything with the eye of someone trained in tactical assessment. She was evaluating his capabilities, he realized, probably trying to determine what kind of person she might end up bound to for life. The thought made his stomach lurch. Marriage had always been something abstract for Marcus, a possibility for some distant future when he was ready to settle down. He certainly hadn't expected it to be thrust upon him as a diplomatic necessity by an alien culture he'd never heard of. "Your ship is well maintained," Zarathe observed as they reached the main cabin. "You take pride in your equipment. When you spend months alone in deep space, your ship becomes more than just transportation," Marcus replied, gesturing for her to take a seat at the small table. "It becomes home, lifeline, and sometimes your only companion." Something in his tone must have resonated with her because Zarathe's expression softened slightly. "You understand solitude, then. Many beings fear it." "Sometimes it's peaceful," Marcus admitted, moving to the food synthesizer. "Can I get you something to eat or drink?" "You've had a rough few days." "That would be appreciated." As Marcus programmed the synthesizer for basic nutritional fare, he found himself thinking about the impossible situation they were in. A few hours ago, he had been a free man with nothing more complicated to worry about than navigation charts and fuel consumption. Now he was apparently engaged to an alien diplomat whose father commanded a fleet, all because he had done what any decent person would do when they saw someone in trouble. "Marcus Chen," Zarathe said softly. He turned to find her studying him with those unsettling violet eyes. "Yes? You are troubled by this turn of events." It wasn't a question. "Well, yes, wouldn't you be? I mean, an hour ago we were strangers. Now we're apparently supposed to get married to prevent an interstellar incident." "Among my people, arranged marriages are common," Zarathe said. "Love is considered a luxury that may or may not develop over time. Duty and honor are more important foundations for a lasting bond." Marcus set a plate of synthesized food in front of her, trying to process her words. "And you're okay with this? With potentially spending your life with someone you just met?" Zarathe picked at the food delicately before answering. I am a daughter of the Luminari. I have always known that my life would be shaped by duty rather than personal desire. If that duty now requires marriage to a human who was brave enough to risk his life for a stranger, then I have encountered worse fates. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement, Marcus said dryly. A small smile played at the corners of Zarathe's mouth. You have a strange sense of humor for a human. The intelligence reports about your species did not mention this trait. Intelligence reports? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Your people have been studying humans? The Luminari study all spacefaring species, Zarathe replied matter-of-factly. It is prudent to understand potential allies and enemies. Humans are an interesting case. How so? You are simultaneously predictable and completely unpredictable. Your actions follow patterns of what you call morality, but those patterns often lead to choices that are tactically disadvantageous, like risking your life to save a stranger. Marcus sat down across from her, studying her face. And what do your intelligence reports say about that? That humans are either supremely confident in their abilities, or they possess a form of calculated madness that makes them dangerous allies and terrifying enemies. Which do you think I am? Zarathe was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. I think, she said finally, that you are a man who saw someone in trouble and acted without considering the consequences. Whether that makes you confident or mad, I have not yet decided. Marcus laughed despite himself. When you put it that way, maybe I am a little crazy. Perhaps, Zarathe agreed, but it was your madness that saved my life. As if summoned by their conversation, the ship's communication system chimed with an incoming transmission. Marcus frowned as he moved to the control console, wondering who could be trying to reach him in this remote system. The answer became clear as soon as he activated the viewer. A stern-faced Luminari male in elaborate military dress appeared on the screen, his violet eyes blazing with barely controlled fury. I am High Admiral Teamaran of the 3rd Luminary Fleet, the figure announced in a voice like controlled thunder. I seek word of my daughter Zarathe. Our long-range sensors detected the destruction of her escort and the presence of a human vessel in this system. Marcus felt his mouth go dry as he realized he was looking at his potential father-in-law. Admiral, your daughter is safe. She's here on my ship. Show her to me, now! Zarathe appeared beside Marcus, her bearing instantly becoming more formal and military. Father, I live, though my mission has encountered complications. The Admiral's expression shifted through several emotions, relief and anger competing for dominance. The Kethvar ambush was more effective than our intelligence suggested. Are you injured? I am whole, Father. This human, Marcus Chen, arrived and drove off my attackers. Without his intervention, I would likely be dead or worse. Admiral Teamaran's gaze shifted to Marcus, and suddenly the human understood why this man commanded a fleet. The weight of his attention was like standing in the path of a starship's engines. Human Marcus Chen, the Admiral said slowly, you have saved my daughter's life. Yes, sir. It was the right thing to do. The right thing, the Admiral repeated, and something in his tone made Marcus realize that the situation was about to become much more complicated. The silence that followed Admiral Teamaran's words stretched across the communication link like a growing storm. Marcus could practically feel the weight of the Admiral's scrutiny through the screen, and beside him, Zarathe had gone completely still. Father, she said carefully, there are cultural protocols that must be observed. Protocols, the Admiral repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Daughter, explain to me exactly what protocols you speak of. Marcus watched as Zarathe straightened even further, if that was possible. When she spoke, her voice carried the formal cadence of someone reciting ancient law. By the saving of my life in combat, human Marcus Chen has earned the right to claim the debt of life. As an unmarried daughter of noble blood, I am bound by our ancestors' laws to offer myself in marriage as payment for this debt." The Admiral's face went through a fascinating series of expressions. First shock, then calculation, then something that might have been amusement, followed quickly by what Marcus could only describe as military, tactical assessment. "I see," Admiral Tamaran said slowly. "And human Marcus Chen? What is your response to this offer?" Marcus felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff with no idea how deep the drop might be. "Admiral, with respect, I'm still trying to understand the full implications of the situation." "The implications," the Admiral said, "are considerable." Before anyone could respond, another voice cut through the communication. "Admiral, we have a problem." The screen flickered and split, showing a second luminary in military uniform. "Sir, we've detected a Kethvar raiding fleet moving toward your daughter's last known position. 12 ships, including at least 3 heavy cruisers." Marcus felt his blood turn cold. 12 ships? For one person? "Zarathe is not just one person," the Admiral explained grimly. "She is my daughter, and her capture would provide the Kethvar with significant leverage against the Luminari Confederation. They would use her to force concessions or to sell her to our enemies." "How long until they reach this system?" Zarathe asked, her voice steady despite the obvious danger. 6 hours, maybe 7 at their current speed, the tactical officer reported. Admiral Tamaran's expression hardened into something that belonged on the bridge of a warship. "Commander, begin preparations for fleet deployment. I want the 2nd and 4th battle groups ready to move within the hour." "Sir, that will leave the Kepler defense grid severely undermanned. My daughter's life takes priority. Execute the order." Marcus watched this exchange with growing alarm. "Admiral, wait. You're talking about deploying 2 battle groups? That sounds like enough firepower to level a planet." "The Kethvar have made this personal," the Admiral replied coldly. "They will learn the cost of threatening my family." "But sir," Marcus pressed, "won't that kind of military response escalate the situation? I mean, we're talking about what could become a major interstellar incident." The Admiral's gaze fixed on Marcus with laser intensity. "Human, you clearly do not understand the politics of this region. The Kethvar have been testing our resolve for months, probing our defenses, attacking our shipping. This assault on my daughter is a declaration of war in all but name." Zarathe stepped forward slightly. "Father, perhaps there is another way." "Explain." "If human Marcus Chen accepts the marriage bond, he becomes family. The attack on me becomes an attack on him as well. Under interspecies treaty law, any human fleet assets in the region would have legal justification to assist in response." Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "I don't have a fleet. I have 1 ship." "But you are human," Zarathe explained patiently. "If we are married, then by law, you become a member of the Luminari nobility through our bond. Any human military presence in this sector would be obligated to assist family members under threat." "And," Admiral Tamaran added with a calculating smile, "I happen to know that the Human Colonial Defense Force has a patrol group currently resupplying at the Vegan Republic stations, only 2 systems away." Marcus felt like the universe was playing some kind of elaborate joke on him. "You want me to get married so you can justify calling in human military backup?" "The marriage bond would make the Kethvar attack a matter of human honor as well as luminary honor," the Admiral explained. 2 fleets responding to an attack on allied nobility is very different from 1 fleet protecting its own. It sends a message to other potential aggressors. "This is insane," Marcus muttered, running his hands through his hair. 6 hours ago, I was worried about asteroid navigation. Now I'm apparently a key piece in some kind of interstellar chess game." "Marcus Chen," Zarathe said softly, and something in her voice made him look at her directly. I understand that this is overwhelming, but you must understand what is at stake. Enlighten me. The Kethvar are not simply pirates. They are part of a larger coalition that seeks to destabilize this entire region of space. If they succeed in capturing me, they gain not only a valuable hostage, but proof that they can strike at the heart of Luminari power with impunity. Admiral Tamaran nodded grimly. Other species would see this as evidence of our weakness. Trade agreements would be reconsidered. Defense pacts would be questioned. The delicate balance that keeps this sector peaceful would collapse. Marcus looked between father and daughter, seeing the family resemblance in their shared determination. And if I agree to this marriage, what exactly changes? Everything, Zarathe replied simply. The attack becomes not just an assault on the Luminari, but an insult to humanity as well. It transforms a regional conflict into a violation of interspecies law. Plus, the Admiral added with what might have been a smile, the Kethvar are not prepared to face combined human and Luminari tactical doctrine. They have studied us separately, but never as an integrated force. The communication officer's voice interrupted again. Admiral, incoming priority transmission from the Human Colonial Defense Force, Admiral Patricia Morrison commanding. Put her through, the Admiral ordered. A new figure appeared on the split screen, a stern-looking human woman in the blue and silver uniform of the HCDF. Admiral Tamaran, we've been monitoring Kethvar fleet movements in your space. Do you require assistance? Admiral Morrison, the Admiral replied formally. The situation is complex. Marcus watched as Admiral Morrison's gaze shifted to take in both him and Zarathe. Her expression went through several changes as she processed the scene. Captain Chen, she said, and Marcus realized with surprise that she recognized him. I should have known you'd be in the middle of whatever this is. You know him? Admiral Tamaran asked. Captain Chen is something of a legend among deep space explorers, Admiral Morrison explained. He's the one who discovered the lost colony ship, Endurance, and guided them to safety. Also found the cure for Rigel fever among the archives of that derelict station in the Vega system. Marcus felt his face flush. That was just luck and being in the right place at the right time. Modesty, Admiral Morrison observed. Another famous Chen trait. Captain, what exactly is your involvement in the current situation? Marcus looked at Zarathe, who nodded encouragingly. I saved the Admiral's daughter from Kethvar raiders. Apparently that means I'm now engaged to be married under Luminari law. Admiral Morrison's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. I see. And the approaching Kethvar fleet? Is coming to capture me, Zarathe explained. My father wishes to deploy 2 battle groups to prevent this. However, if Captain Chen accepts the marriage bond, the situation becomes a matter of human honor as well as Luminari honor. Meaning my patrol group would have legal justification to assist, Admiral Morrison concluded. Interesting. She paused, studying Marcus intently. Captain Chen, what are your thoughts on this proposed arrangement? Marcus felt like he was drowning in implications he didn't fully understand. Admiral, I'm just trying to do the right thing here. I saved someone who needed help. I didn't expect it to turn into a diplomatic incident. The best people rarely do, Admiral Morrison said kindly. But the universe has a way of putting us where we're needed, whether we plan it or not. Admiral Morrison, Admiral Tamaran interjected. Time is becoming a critical factor. The Kethvar fleet will be here in less than 6 hours. Understood. Admiral Morrison turned back to Marcus. Captain, I can't order you to accept this marriage. It has to be your choice. But I can tell you that from a strategic standpoint, a human-luminary alliance in this sector would significantly strengthen the position of both our peoples. And personally? Marcus asked. Admiral Morrison smiled. Personally, I think you've already made your choice. You just haven't admitted it to yourself yet." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Zarathe spoke up. "Marcus Chen, may I speak with you privately?" "Of course." Marcus turned to the Admiral. "Sir, can you give us a few minutes?" "Time is short," the Admiral warned. "But yes, you have 10 minutes." The communication link closed, leaving Marcus and Zarathe alone in the cabin. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "This is all moving very fast," Marcus said finally. "Yes," Zarathe agreed. "Perhaps too fast." "What do you really think about all this?" Marcus asked. "Not the political implications or the cultural obligations. What do you, Zarathe, think about potentially spending your life married to a human you just met?" Zarathe moved to the small porthole and looked out at the alien landscape. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "I have been trained from childhood to serve my people in whatever way necessary. I expected that someday my marriage would be arranged for political benefit. I did not expect that the arrangement would come about because someone risked their life to save mine." "That doesn't answer my question." She turned back to face him. "You want to know if I could care for you. I want to know if you think this could work. Really work. Not just as a political arrangement, but as a partnership between two people." Zarathe studied his face intently. "You are not what I expected when I thought of marriage to an alien species. What did you expect? Someone seeking political advantage. Someone who saw alliance with Luminari nobility as a path to power or wealth." She paused. "You seem genuinely distressed by the political implications. That is unusual." "I never wanted political power," Marcus admitted. "I became an explorer because I liked the freedom, the independence. The idea of becoming some kind of diplomatic figure terrifies me. And yet you cannot ignore the consequences of refusing." Marcus slumped into a chair. "Explain it to me again, all of it. I want to understand exactly what I'm choosing between." Zarathe sat across from him, her expression serious. "If you refuse the marriage bond, I am dishonored. My father must respond to that dishonor as well as to the Kethvar threat. The military response will be overwhelming, but it will also be seen as an act of aggression by some of our neighbors. And if I accept, then the response becomes a joint operation between allies. It sends a message of cooperation rather than domination. Other species are more likely to support us, or at least remain neutral. But I become a Luminari noble, with all the responsibilities that entails. Yes. Though as my husband, you would also gain certain privileges and protections." Marcus laughed bitterly. "I don't want privileges. I want my simple life back." "That life ended the moment you decided to help a stranger," Zarathe said gently. "The universe rarely allows good deeds to go without consequences." "You make it sound like a punishment." "No," Zarathe said, and for the first time since they'd met, her voice carried a note of warmth. "I make it sound like fate." Before Marcus could respond, the communication system chimed again. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the screen. "Captain Chen, I apologize for interrupting, but we have new intelligence on the Kethvar fleet. They're not just coming for the Admiral's daughter." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "Our long-range sensors have detected additional ships moving to support the main fleet. This isn't a kidnapping operation anymore. It's the beginning of a full-scale invasion of Luminari space." Marcus felt the weight of the universe settling on his shoulders. "How many ships total?" 47, with more still joining the formation. Captain, this has become much bigger than a rescue operation. The Kethvar are making their move for territorial expansion, and they're using the attack on the Admiral's daughter as the opening gambit." Zarathe moved to stand beside Marcus, her hand briefly touching his shoulder. "Now do you understand? This was never about cultural obligations or political convenience. This is about the future of peace in this sector of space." Marcus looked up at her. seeing the weight of responsibility in her violet eyes. "And you think our marriage can somehow tip the balance?" "I think," Zarathe said quietly, "that sometimes the universe chooses unlikely champions. And I think that you, Marcus Chen, are exactly the kind of unlikely champion we need." The communication system chimed once more. Admiral Thamaran's stern face reappeared. "Captain Chen, I need your decision. The Kethvar fleet will be here in 4 hours, and we need to begin coordination with human forces immediately if we are to have any hope of stopping them." Marcus looked around his simple ship's cabin, thinking of the quiet life he was about to leave behind. Then he looked at Zarathe, at the determination in her eyes and the courage she had shown facing the raiders alone. "Admiral," he said, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice, "I accept the marriage bond." The Admiral's expression shifted to something that might have been approval. "Excellent. We will begin the ceremony immediately upon my arrival. In the meantime, you and my daughter must prepare for what comes next." "And what comes next?" Marcus asked. Admiral Thamaran's smile was sharp as a blade. "Next, Captain Chen, you learn what it means to be part of a Luminari battle fleet. I hope you are ready for a very different kind of adventure." The marriage ceremony was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Within 2 hours of his decision, Admiral Thamaran's flagship, Starfire, had arrived in orbit, along with what seemed like half the Luminari fleet. The Admiral had wasted no time in having both Marcus and Zarathe transported to his ship, where the ceremony took place in the ship's ceremonial chamber. The ritual itself was surprisingly brief, but deeply meaningful. Marcus found himself making vows in ancient Luminari that Zarathe whispered to him, while she spoke words in standard galactic that bound their lives together according to both cultures. When they exchanged the traditional luminary bonding crystals, Marcus felt a strange sense of rightness about the whole situation, despite how quickly everything was moving. "It is done," Admiral Thamaran announced to the assembled officers. "Captain Marcus Chen is now a son of House Thamaran and holds the rank of Strategic Advisor in the Luminari Defense Forces." Marcus looked down at the blue and silver uniform he now wore, complete with insignia he didn't recognize. "Strategic Advisor? A temporary rank," the Admiral explained with a slight smile, "though I suspect it may become permanent once this crisis is resolved." Admiral Morrison, who had attended the ceremony via holographic projection, nodded approvingly. "Captain Chen, or should I say, Advisor Chen, your first briefing starts in 10 minutes. We have a lot of ground to cover." The briefing room aboard Starfire was impressive in its efficiency. Holographic displays showed the tactical situation in 3 dimensions, with enemy and friendly forces represented by different colored icons. Marcus found himself seated at a conference table surrounded by some of the most experienced military minds from 2 different species. "Current situation," Admiral Morrison began, pointing to the main display. "The Kethvar force has grown to 53 ships, including 6 heavy cruisers and 2 dreadnoughts. They're organized into 3 attack groups, suggesting a coordinated assault rather than a simple raid." Admiral Thamaran nodded grimly. "Our intelligence suggests they plan to capture the Kepler mining stations and use them as a staging area for further expansion into our territory." "What forces do we have available?" Marcus asked, still feeling strange about being included in such a high-level briefing. "The 2nd and 4th Luminary battle groups," the Admiral replied, "plus Admiral Morrison's patrol group and 2 additional human squadrons that are en route. Combined strength?" 38 ships, Admiral Morrison answered. "We're outnumbered, but our vessels are generally more advanced." Marcus studied the display, trying to process everything he was seeing. The tactical situation looked grim, but something about the Kethvar formation bothered him. "Admiral, may I ask a question about Kethvar tactics?" "Of course." "They're slavers and raiders, right?" They rely on quick strikes and overwhelming force against isolated targets. That's correct. Marcus stood and moved closer to the display. But this formation, it's designed for a pitched battle against an organized defense. That's not what raiders do. Zarathe, who had been silent during most of the briefing, leaned forward. He's right. The Kethvar avoid fair fights. They prefer to strike where resistance is minimal. So why are they coming at us with everything they have? Marcus mused. Unless what? Admiral Thameron asked. Unless they know something we don't. Marcus manipulated the display, zooming out to show a wider view of local space. Admiral, what other strategic assets are in this region? Admiral Morrison's eyes widened as she caught on. The Centauri Gate. What's the Centauri Gate? Marcus asked. A massive space station that controls the primary hyperspace route between this sector and the core systems, Zarathe explained. If someone controlled it, they could cut off trade and communication for dozens of systems. Admiral Thameron was already calling up new displays. The gate is defended by only a skeleton crew right now. Most of their forces were reassigned to patrol duty last month. So the attack on your daughter was bait, Marcus realized. They wanted to draw your fleets away from the real target. A sound analysis, Admiral Morrison agreed. But that leaves us with a problem. We can't ignore the threat to this system, but we also can't let them take the gate. Marcus stared at the tactical display, an idea beginning to form in his mind. What if we don't have to choose? Explain, Admiral Thameron ordered. The Kethvar think in terms of traditional raider tactics, right? Hit fast, overwhelm the target, get out before reinforcements arrive, but they're not used to facing coordinated resistance. Go on. Marcus began manipulating the display again, showing hypothetical ship movements. What if we make them think they're succeeding? Let them commit to the attack on this system, then hit them with everything we have when they're fully engaged. That's incredibly risky, Admiral Morrison pointed out. If we miscalculate the timing, we could lose both objectives. Not if we split our forces correctly. Marcus was getting excited now, the tactical puzzle engaging his explorer's instincts for finding unconventional solutions. Admiral Morrison, how long would it take your fastest ships to reach the Centauri Gate? 2 hours at maximum burn. And how long for the Kethvar to fully commit to an assault on this system? Admiral Thameron considered. Given their numbers and formation, at least 3 hours to properly engage our defenses. Then we have a window. Marcus turned to face both admirals. We send Admiral Morrison's ships to defend the gate, while the Luminary fleet makes a fighting retreat from this system. The Kethvar will think they're winning and press their advantage. And then, Zarathe asked, then the Luminary fleet turns around and hits them from behind while they're engaged with the system defenses. Classic hammer and anvil. The room was quiet for several moments as the senior officers considered the plan. Finally, Admiral Morrison nodded slowly. It could work, but the timing would have to be perfect. There's another factor to consider, Admiral Thameron added. The plan requires the Kethvar to believe our retreat is genuine. If they suspect a trap, they'll hold back their reserve forces. Marcus grinned. That's where my ship comes in. I beg your pardon? The Wanderer is fast, maneuverable, and expendable compared to your capital ships. If I make a run at their formation, create some chaos, it might convince them that we're desperate enough to send in single ships. Absolutely not, Zarathe said immediately. You are not risking your life again, especially not hours after we were married. She's right, Admiral Thameron agreed. You are now part of this family, and I will not risk my daughter's happiness on a reckless gesture. Marcus looked around the room at the faces of people who had, in the space of a few hours, become his allies, his family, and his responsibility. Admirals, with respect, this isn't about reckless gestures. This is about doing whatever it takes to protect the people we care about. The plan is sound without the suicide run. Admiral Morrison pointed out. The plan is good, Marcus conceded, but it's not enough. The Kethvar have more ships than we do. Even if the tactics work perfectly, we're going to take heavy losses. He turned to Zarathei. You said earlier that humans are either supremely confident or possess a form of calculated madness. Maybe it's time for some of that madness. What are you proposing? She asked quietly. Marcus moved back to the tactical display. I'm proposing that we use what makes humans different. We don't just think outside the box, we tend to forget there was a box in the first place. Meaning? Meaning we don't fight this battle the way anyone expects us to. Over the next hour, Marcus outlined a plan that was part tactics, part psychology, and part pure audacity. By the time he finished explaining, both admirals were staring at him with expressions of disbelief. That, Admiral Morrison said finally, is either brilliant or insane. Probably both, Marcus admitted, but it's also something the Kethvar will never see coming. Admiral Thamaran stood and moved to the display, studying the proposed plan from every angle. The variables are numerous. The chances for error are significant. But if it works, Zarathei added quietly, the Kethvar won't just be defeated. They'll be too shocked to consider this kind of aggression again for years. The psychological impact alone would be worth the risk, Admiral Morrison agreed. Admiral Thamaran looked at Marcus with something approaching respect. Very well. We will implement your plan. But I want modifications to minimize the risks to our personnel. Of course, sir. And Marcus, the Admiral continued, if this works, you may find that your temporary rank becomes very permanent indeed. 3 hours later, Marcus found himself back aboard the Wanderer, but his ship was no longer alone. Attached to his hull were 6 luminary stealth drones, each packed with enough firepower to cripple a cruiser. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. While the main fleets maneuvered according to the tactics they had discussed, Marcus would use his small ship to deliver a surgical strike at the heart of the Kethvar formation. Wanderer, this is Starfire. Actual, Admiral Thamaran's voice came through the comm. Enemy fleet is entering engagement range. You are cleared for insertion. Copy that, Starfire. Beginning approach. Marcus fired his engines and dove toward the massive Kethvar formation, his ship's small size making it nearly invisible among the larger vessels. Beside him, Zarathei monitored the stealth drones from the co-pilot's seat. Targeting data locked, she reported. Drones are ready for deployment. Wanderer, this is Admiral Morrison, came another voice. We've engaged the advance force at the Centauri Gate. They took the bait completely. Main force is fully committed to your position. Marcus smiled grimly as he watched the Kethvar ships growing larger on his display. Understood, Admiral. Beginning final approach. The next few minutes were a blur of controlled chaos. Marcus threaded his ship through the Kethvar formation, releasing the stealth drones at carefully calculated points. Each drone found its target, and suddenly 6 of the enemy's largest ships were crippled by internal explosions. What was that? Came a panicked transmission in the Kethvar language, automatically translated by the ship's computer. Unknown vessels inside our formation! How did they get past our sensors? But the confusion Marcus had sown was just the beginning. As the Kethvar fleet tried to identify the threat in their midst, the Luminari battle groups completed their feigned retreat and then executed a perfect reversal, catching the enemy forces in a crossfire between the system defenses and the returning fleet. Starfire, this is Morrison. Admiral Morrison's voice cut through the battle chatter. Centauri Gate is secure. Enemy forces here are in full retreat. Excellent, Admiral Thamaran replied. Main force is breaking formation. They're trying to disengage. Marcus pulled his ship clear of the battle zone and watched as the combined human and Luminari forces systematically dismantled the Kethvar fleet. Ships that had seemed so threatening hours earlier were now fleeing in disarray, their dreams of conquest shattered by tactics they had never imagined. "Wanderer, this is Starfire." The Admiral's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "Outstanding work, Strategic Advisor. Return to the flagship for debriefing." As Marcus set course for the Luminari flagship, Zarathe reached over and took his hand. "So, husband, how does it feel to have won your first space battle?" Marcus looked at her, at the displays showing the retreating enemy forces, and at the ships of two different species working together in the aftermath of victory. "Strange," he admitted. "A week ago I was worried about navigation charts. Now I'm apparently a war hero." "Not a war hero," Zarathe corrected with a smile. "A peace hero. What you did today will prevent conflicts for years to come." "And what happens now?" "Now we begin the interesting part," she replied. "Learning to be married while serving as diplomatic liaisons between our peoples." Marcus laughed. "You know, when I woke up this morning, that wasn't even in my top 1,000 guesses for how my day would end." "The universe has a sense of humor," Zarathe agreed. "But I think it also has good judgment." "How so?" "It took a human explorer who saved strangers without counting the cost and paired him with a Luminari diplomat who understands the value of building bridges between worlds." She squeezed his hand gently. "I think we might actually be good at this." Marcus looked out at the stars, thinking about the adventures that lay ahead. His simple life as an independent explorer was over, but something told him that what was beginning would be far more interesting. "Starfire to Wanderer," came another transmission. "Admiral Morrison is requesting a joint planning session for long-term regional security. Apparently she has some ideas about a permanent human-luminary cooperation treaty." "And so it begins?" Zarathe said with amusement. Marcus activated the comm. "Starfire, this is Wanderer. Tell Admiral Morrison we'll be right over." As his ship approached the flagship, Marcus reflected on how quickly his life had changed. He had started the day as a simple explorer and was ending it as a married man, a military advisor, and apparently a key figure in interstellar diplomacy. "Any regrets?" Zarathe asked, as if reading his thoughts. Marcus considered the question seriously. "Ask me again in a few years," he said finally. "But right now? No. No regrets at all." The docking bay of the Starfire opened before them, and Marcus guided his ship inside, carrying his new life toward whatever adventures awaited among the stars.